What comes to mind when you think of the Florida Keys? Sunburnt tourists, long-lost galleon treasure, fresh key lime pie? This renowned tourist destination is also a complex set of fragile ecosystems. In this episode, we're joined with fellow biologist Christina Wilson. Let's take a dive into her role protecting this unique environment. All right, we are rolling. And we're here with Christina Wilson.
Yeah.
We took her out of the swamps and brought her to Ohio.
That's right.
And we're doing this podcast from the comfort of our office here in Columbus, Ohio. So that's a little different. Usually we do these out in the field, but Christina's a special guest. She's got a lot of history with Bray Wilderness, so we wanted to bring her here to the office.
And I'm not going to lie, I'm very happy about it because we're not in the hot summer weather of the Florida Keys right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm okay not sweating in this interview.
Yeah, so usually when we do these podcasts, we're out in the field and we're dealing with weather, we're dealing with all types of rogue sounds and stuff like that. But this is a little bit more controlled, more chill.
I'm good with sweat beads not rolling down my backside right now.
Yeah, all right. Sounds good, sounds good. So I've got some questions for you. And like I said, we're doing this a little different than some of the other podcasts we have done because it's a little bit more chilled and controlled.
Yeah.
First of all, I want the audience to know how we met Christina. How did we meet you? Because I like the origin stories. We've been very lucky throughout the history of Bray Wilderness to meet some fantastic fixers, experts in the field that eventually we become really good friends with, and you're one of those people. So let's start with how did we even meet you?
Are you sure? Are you sure you want me to share this?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, we were, I had a long day of scuba diving with some really good friends and the owner of a fabulous restaurant in the Florida Keys called Castaways. Got good sushi. And we were sitting at the table and had a few drinks, obviously, rightly so, my buddy's restaurant.
Have you had a few drinks before this right now?
Right now?
Just for the record.
No, not right now, now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for later, though.
Okay.
That's for the live podcast.
For live stream.
That's for the live stream. Yeah, had a few cocktails with everybody. We'd gone diving that day. It was a beautiful day. And before we sat down, I looked next to our table and I saw Coyote, the king of sting. And I told my buddy, John, the owner of the restaurant, hey man, you got the king of sting in your restaurant. And he was like, who? And I was like, the guy gets bit and stung by stuff. And he's like, oh my gosh, yeah, he does look familiar. And he's like, let's go say hi. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like going up to, celebrities and all that. And he was like, well, this is my damn restaurant, and we're going to do what I want. And I'm like, alrighty then. So I went and introduced him, and before I could say anything, my buddy John was like, well, this here is skeeter bite. And I was like, because I work with mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And I was like, thanks, John, for that introduction of me to Coyote, calling me skeeter bite. And Coyote was like, man, we were trying to film with mosquitoes last month, but there weren't any mosquitoes in the Everglades. And I was like, well, yeah, because it wasn't mosquito season. So he was like, I'd love to, work with you guys at some point with mosquitoes. And then a few months later, y'all flew out and helped you guys get up in the mosquito helicopter and get to join some of the team. There at Florida Keys Mosquito Control, which was really cool.
Exactly, yeah. It was a bit of a chance encounter. We were in the Florida Keys. This was 2022.
Yeah.
Right? That's year 2022. We're in the Keys for another project, and Coyote was out. And I remember when he came back from dinner that night, he's like, Mario, I think we've got our mosquito episode. Because we've been trying to produce like a really good mosquito episode for a long time, but it's difficult, So the first time I met you was actually during that shoot. Right? So a few months later, go back to the Keys, and you're working for mosquito control. And we conceptualized a really cool episode where we're going to do a lab test, right? Where we're going to have hundreds, maybe thousands of mosquitoes controlled. Okay, just going to put his arm in and just get,
Which when I brought that idea to mosquito control, I'm like, would it be possible if a guy named Coyote Peterson can get stung and bit by a whole bunch of mosquitoes? And they were like, sure, which I could not believe that they said yes to.
And then they gave you your 2 weeks notice after that.
Well, I gave my 2 weeks notice.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
No, they did not fire me after that. Oh my gosh, that would have been horrible. I left them to join Fish and Wildlife. So
Yeah, which we'll get into.
yeah, so my dream job, I got to have my dream job after that. Though hunting mosquitoes was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that episode was very successful. I mean, it's got, I think, as it was released in May 7th, 2022, and has 7.1 million views.
Yeah.
So successful episode.
Well, everybody hates mosquitoes.
And
so.
Besides getting that fantastic video out of it, we made a fantastic friend for life and a new member of Brave Wilderness. And since that, we had like a lot of cool adventures.
Yes.
But the one thing I'm going to say is during that shoot, you were became a very natural member of our crew. Our crew when we're traveling is very small. Just usually myself, Coyote, and then another camera guy, Trent. And your personality is just, the way I describe it is like I felt like I knew you already for a long time. So we're like very kindred spirits, right? Hopefully that was your experience,
Yes.
that first film shoot, because it seemed like you wanted to continue to hang out with us.
Yeah, you're fellow weirdos just like me. So.
Yeah. So real quick, mosquito control. That's if you haven't watched that video, check it out. We'll provide a link in the about section of this.
It is a really good video, and going up in the helicopters, there's no one that does it like the Florida Keys mosquito control, going as low as they do in those helicopters, and it's just a wild ride. Those helicopter pilots are like cowboys of the sky.
Yeah, it's really cool because is the Florida Keys kind of like ground zero of mosquito control, right? That's what we learned,
yeah, I
right?
think they're one of the oldest mosquito control units in the U.S. I think they're kind of like the originators in Florida. Started there. There's a lot of early history in the Florida Keys, and it kind of all started there in the Florida Keys. But they've just got it so dialed in with their field folks and then their pilots.
I would say mosquito control, they're the unsung heroes of the world because when I'm out in the field back in the days and would deal with mosquitoes, but from the aspect of prevention of disease, right? Of spreading of disease, like because mosquitoes are a big vector of different diseases. So anyways, that's when we first met you, and after that, we kind of got stuck, right?
Yeah. I have had an absolute blast on all of our adventures.
Yeah, because after we worked with you for mosquito control, we then went back the same year, actually in August. So everything in 2022.
Every time you guys want to come film with me in Florida, it's in the hottest month of the year. Always.
For the record, that's not my decision. That's not my decision.
Yeah.
But went back to Florida and we produced a few episodes with you. What were those episodes that we produced that actually you were in the role of like being on camera and like a host?
Yeah, there was a few. We did a lobster one. We did a tarpon feeding one. Learning how to become a certified mermaid.
Yeah, you became a mermaid, right?
Became a mermaid, yeah. So there was a lot of fun and a lot of wild things happening there. Yeah, I tell everybody it was like training for SEAL Team 6.
Yeah, that was cool.
They were the SEAL team in general. I was like, man, these women and men who do this, they are professional freedivers. You're going in the open ocean with your legs bound in a tail. Yeah. And then you have to learn how to rescue and save somebody. It was absolutely wild.
So actually, let's go back into that. So like, what is the mermaid culture in Florida? Because mermaids still exist. And as you were mentioning, like it is kind of like a sport, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of physical feats to like be able to dive in the water with your legs bound and such. So how common are mermaids in the Keys?
Well, I didn't honestly know much about mermaid culture, but my dive instructor, Anna, she's, well known in the mermaid, the mer people.
The mer people.
And she was on the Netflix series Mer People. But apparently professional. It's a real show.
I didn't know that.
It's a real show. You gotta watch it.
Okay.
But these people, there's a huge, tribe of mermaids that are just more of people that just wear these outfits versus a really small group of people who are professional freediving mermaids. That's like, I think professionally, she said there was only like 19 in Florida. So that number's a lot smaller than I thought it was. A majority of like the mer culture is people donning these outfits and posing, you know, doing kids' birthdays or other events and stuff like that. But in that Netflix show, and even learning from Anna, those silicone tails that they buy are like thousands of dollars, like maybe starting, I think, 5,000 is at the lowest, and they're molded to these people's bodies. So they're, you know, very unique. But
as you mentioned, the maybe smaller group of mermaids alive today, people pretending to be mermaids.
Yes.
It's more of the sport of it, of free diving and such, which is exactly what you did. You learned how to. We went out into the open ocean. I actually was filming you guys from underwater, so I put on a scuba suit and I was filming you guys, and so you got to learn how to like properly free dive and stuff. And she taught you some really cool like breath holding techniques.
Yeah.
How long did you hold your breath?
I held it for 1 minute and 42.
That's impressive.
Super impressive. And like her, what is it called? What is it when someone's like talking to you all so often? Like
calm?
No, it's like this whole thing where people, you know, barely touch a mic.
Oh, like ASMR.
When she was talking to me, it was like ASMR. So it like brought me down to this like really cool, calm, collected zone in my head. And she was like doing like soft touches on my shoulder the whole time, you know. And so it was such like a calming thing. But there was these techniques that she taught you of how to breathe and releasing your breath that really calms down your heart rate and allows you to hold your breath a lot longer, which was really cool. Now I use for when I go lobstering.
No, the art of holding your breath is amazing, and it is about controlling your body, controlling the rate of like oxygen and your heart rate and such. And before she taught you that breath holding like process, how long did you hold your breath for? Because I think we tested that, right? Before you did that, so what? It was like 30 seconds?
30 seconds. Super, super pathetic.
Yeah, so from a chance encounter with Coyote Peterson and your personality of just being kind of like, I guess, I'm not going to say brave enough, but just friendly enough to go up to Coyote and be like, hey, I'm a fan of your work. And, you know, then to us, you helping to produce a mosquito episode, to then fast forward you like in some of our episodes as a host. That's so cool.
You know, my suggestion is if you see a celebrity get drunk and then go up to them and, you know, that it'll work out.
Okay.
No, don't.
I mean, it might be 50-50.
Yeah.
You might get arrested, or you might
get arrested. Don't do what I did.
Yeah. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes taking care of your mental health can feel like a big step, but your mind matters just as much as your body. And whether you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck in a rut, or just looking for some extra support, talking to a therapist can really help. Traditional in-person therapy can run you between $100 and $250 per session, but BetterHelp offers online therapy at a flat weekly rate, saving you time and money. In fact, it can cost up to 50% less than in-person sessions. Even if you never tried therapy before, it can be a great way to learn positive coping strategies, set healthy boundaries, and just become more in tune with who you are. You don't need to have gone through something major. Sometimes it's just about having someone to talk to. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 5 million served worldwide. It's flexible, convenient, and you can switch therapists anytime. Visit BetterHelp.com/GlobalGuardians to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/GlobalGuardians. I forgot. So fast forward to that chance encounter with Coyote, right? To then helping us to produce a mosquito episode.
Yes.
To then playing a mermaid in an episode that you're hosting, right?
Yeah.
And then several other episodes that we filmed. And then we took you to Costa Rica.
Yes.
Which is cool. So was that your first time in Costa Rica?
It was.
Yeah. What did you think? Because I remember we were planning the rest of our year and productions, and we've been to Costa Rica tons. Like it's one of our favorite destinations. And when we were brainstorming, we were like, well, what can we do different? You know, we've done a lot of the stuff there. And then I'm like, well, let's just bring Christina. That's different. Like I think she will add like a new dimension, a new energy to the videos.
Wild card.
And that's exactly what we did. So briefly, what did you think of that Costa Rica trip?
I think when we first got there and started driving, I was already trying to collaborate with you on purchasing a home.
Oh, in Costa Rica. Yeah.
I was like, all right, when can we buy one of these houses on one of these hills? Who's in? Who's with me?
Yeah, Costa Rica has that effect.
Yeah,
for sure.
it was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, we were seeing like toucans the moment we got on the road.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, is that a toucan? And then there was multiple of them. It was wild just seeing all the crazy biodiversity in life immediately there was just heart-filling. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. I really enjoyed you joining us on that trip because the one thing I told the guys after, I was like, Christina didn't complain at all, right? She was, because look, when you travel with someone internationally or just travel with people in general, travel is stressful, as you know, as we experience, right? It's not all fun and games, and you did very well in that you just always brought like a very positive attitude to, every situation.
Well, it was a gorgeous place with my friends, so who wouldn't want to, who couldn't have fun? Yeah. But you guys hustle, man. I don't think people realize how much work goes into filming outdoors and then with wildlife and then getting to locations and the fact that all of you walk so fast.
Sorry about that.
Well, Coyote was like, oh, I was a caddy for, golfers, so I was always having to walk fast, and so he's walking fast, you're walking fast, we're climbing up a mountainside, and I'm trying to look like I can hang with the crew, I think my legs have never been, I lose 10 pounds every time I film with you guys. So if anybody wants to go on a weight loss program, just join the Brave Wilderness crew for a week and you'll lose 10 pounds, I guarantee it.
That's some good insight there, yeah. Because, I mean, you got to see how episodes are created. You got that like behind the scenes. And, I appreciate what you're saying. Like, yes, it's not as easy as people think. And oftentimes, at least Trent, Coyote, and I, we don't have to talk to each other anymore. Yeah. Like, we just know exactly what to do in a situation. And it's taken many years to just get to that point, to be well-oiled.
Yeah, you guys are, for sure.
Yeah, but you did well.
Yeah.
I
think I drank a little too many Monster Energy drinks. Next time, a few less.
Well, that's what keeps us fueled, is Monster.
I would like never drink energy drinks, and when I was with you guys, I was drinking so many, and then I was like, I think I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah. Well, back to your point though, like sometimes, our production schedules are intense because number one, we're searching for different species that maybe are nocturnal.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that means we're staying up really late, but then throughout the day we got to kind of do stuff too. So we're also working during the day, and we set these schedules up, and they could be intense, but they're also fun. I think.
Oh, 100%.
Keeps us fit, which is
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised by the food out there. I was a little saddened by that the fact that it's kind of like a food desert in a sense that there wasn't a lot of local food there, that the mainstream sugar, candies and all that kind of filled the stores out there. So when we went there to buy food for the place we were staying at, the little lodge we were staying at, it was crazy how many foods were not healthy that they were selling there in that part of Costa Rica. So that was really surprising to me that you couldn't just go get some healthy snacks there. Yeah,
I mean, Costa Rica is still technically a third world country, so they do face a lot of issues with, maybe affordable junk food and stuff like that. I mean, we deal with that in a lot of productions.
Yeah.
Also, trying to stay healthy out on a production can be difficult when maybe you don't really have many options. But we also did have some good food, right?
Yes.
There's always the little gems of places that we go to and have some fantastic Costa Rican food, which a lot of like their meats and stuff like don't have like the hormones and
which is true,
stuff.
yeah.
Like it feels different when you're eating some food there versus like in the U.S.
Yes.
So from Costa Rica, we continue to work with you, and kind of we're stuck with you basically.
You're stuck with me.
Yeah.
Forever.
To now here.
I call you all the time about random stuff that I'm
which
constantly dealing with my job.
Which is fantastic. So that's a good transition. Your job. Let's transition to, first of all, you are from Florida. You are a self-proclaimed Florida wild woman.
Florida wild woman.
But is that deceiving? Because technically she's not a native Floridian.
I'm not a native Floridian, but
So-
I have made Florida my home, my forever home.
All right, let's talk
Besides
about
Costa Rica.
let's talk about your your origin story.
Yeah.
So how'd you get to Florida?
Florida.
From where?
From where? Yeah. So originally from California. So I traded the valley for the swamp. And kind of like Jim, he said he's from the Central Valley. I'm from the Central Valleys of California.
Okay.
So wine country, and grew up on the Russian River.
So that explains a little your bouginess.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Okay.
Totally bouginess. Only when it comes to wine, Mario. Come on.
Gotcha.
But grew up in the coast, and my dad had a really cool cabin up in Armstrong Woods. So we actually lived in a national park, Armstrong Woods, and it was where you see these giant redwoods. So every day I got to drive through the park to go home, and it really opened me up to these wide open spaces, rattlesnakes, cougars, wild boars, all that kind of stuff. So picking up rocks, looking for scorpions, snakes, all that good stuff. So I loved from, day one picking up animals that I probably shouldn't have been picking up.
Oh, fantastic. So basically where you lived, how you grew up, like kind of nurtured your love for nature?
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of my family is also in Idaho. And there was 100 acres in the mountains out there that my granddad was born and raised on that property. And we had bears in the backyard. There was a beautiful stream that went through there. There was fresh water that you can drink from a spring there. So every summer was spent out there, and my grandma was like, get out of the house and get outside. So, yeah, a lot of four-wheeling and disturbing wildlife out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what made you make that move from West Coast to, I would say, the extreme?
Yeah.
Very extreme,
Very
right?
extreme. Very extreme.
Not only did you move to Florida, but you
Yes.
moved to the furthest
Yes.
southern portion of the state.
My best friend and husband is a U.S. Coast Guard, and so he got stationed in Key West.
Okay.
And that was a pretty wild move. And I was like, oh my God, Florida. Wow. I never visited Florida before, never had any like family vacations to Florida. So, but the first day I got there and I saw this giant iguana like fly off of a fence, and I was like, yes, I love Florida. This is amazing. Why didn't I get here sooner? So that's fell in love with Florida, but got my degree in biology. And when I first applied for even just a regular park ranger job in Florida, there were 200 other applicants, because who wouldn't want to move to the Florida Keys and work at the parks there? Apparently everybody does. So that was really depressing a little bit, to be like, oh my gosh, I just got my biology degree. Why can't I immediately get even a measly park ranger job for $14? I'm competing against 200 other people. This is wild.
Yeah.
So I started working at the college there.
Okay.
And then got a job with mosquito control, where I got to be out in the field. And that's kind of how you have to do it sometimes, is find a job that gets you in or closer to the field that you want to be in. Sadly, you can't just go straight into that field, which, for wildlife biology, it's a very hard field to get into.
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. When it comes to at least my career, it took a lot of volunteering, a lot of jumping from what I call stepping stone jobs, right? I've been very fortunate with those jobs, but so that's cool. You basically kind of accidentally, in a sense, like had to move to Florida. You weren't necessarily planning that.
Yeah.
And of all places in Florida, you land in the Florida Keys, which I'm originally from Florida, born
Yes.
and raised in South Florida,
Yeah.
in Miami Beach. And it's very important when you meet other Floridians, they will make a distinguishment from South Florida to the rest of Florida. So I always say I was born and raised in South Florida, Miami Beach. But even from South Florida, rest of Florida, then there is the Florida Keys, which is like its own thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, South Florida is subtropical, number one. Then you get down to the Keys, you're getting into a little bit more tropical, but it is an ecosystem of its own that is
Yes.
like nothing else of the rest of Florida. So
Yeah.
that's cool as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying to explore more of Florida, but yeah, as a mosquito control inspector, I got to roam like almost 18,000 different acres along several different islands. So I really got to understand the layout, freshwater, saltwater, all of that, and then I started seeing wildlife biologists going out in the field, and that's when I kind of became friends with them and was like, I'm out here all the time. You know, give me some stuff to do. Let me help you guys out with things, because I'm constantly seeing these animals that you're looking for, you know, and then it kind of became, hey, we've got a position opening up, you know, that I'd been waiting for like 5 years for. You know, I was like, one day, but at the same time I was like, it's never gonna happen, it's never gonna happen. And that's kind of how it is with the wildlife biology career, is it's just a waiting game, or who you know, but that's why I always say, like, networking is great. You know, getting to make those relations with people is key. It's all about who you know, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's evident in just like your personality to, like, you know, go up to Coyote and be like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
And fast forward to,
I mean, obviously,
your
if your
involvement and
personality
stuff.
sucks, you know,
Well,
it's not gonna happen for you.
well, I think what it is just have to be open and be
Yes.
tenacious as to like
Yeah.
what you want. So after those 5 years working for mosquito control, you kind of hinted that you eventually got your dream job.
Yes.
And what is that job?
So I get to manage over 6,000 acres of environmental area in the Florida Keys now. So that's all the way from the top of the Keys all the way down to an island called Sugarloaf, and this is just 110 miles of island chains that I get to be a wildlife biologist and habitat and species conservation.
Heck yeah.
Yes.
So you work for the state then?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, heck yeah. So what about the Keys maybe, like you moved to the Keys, weren't necessarily intending to move there, got this fantastic job. What were some unexpected things you learned about the Florida Keys?
Well, there's a lot of poaching that I was unaware of until I got this job. And that was, I mean, you just don't think about it. You don't think about those things as a regular citizen. You don't notice these things. You know, you're driving by these environmental areas to go to work. You're not thinking about, you know, that car pulled over, possibly hunting migrating birds for the pet industry or pygmy rattlesnakes. You know, so there's all these endangered and threatened species in the Florida Keys that exist nowhere else in the world. And because of that, people want those animals, and which is so sad, you know, especially the mangrove terrapin that we have down there. So there's all these very unique plants and animals that collectors who just want to own something just to say that they have something are heading down there. Even our butterfly species are getting poached, which is wild. So that's all something that I learned about during the job, had no idea about, was the, you know, any type of journal that's, you know, going out into a scientific journal about, you know, where certain animals are breeding is going to be altered so that when that gets published, people aren't reading that and then going out to those areas because that has happened. So I think 10 years ago or something along those lines, a journal, you know, published someone's scientific work on the terrapin out there, and they were almost all poached. Almost every, like, you know, 100 of them, just all poached. And this is like an area that's super hard to get to. And that person was caught, but they released them somewhere else in Florida, which was so sad. So now there's this island that may or may not ever have these terrapin.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you're saying poached, you're saying like individuals are going out there to collect them for the pet trade, right?
For the
to
pet
sell.
trade, to sell.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's something that I don't know if the audience may know, but yeah, South Florida is like the hub of like exotic pets.
Yeah.
The pet trade there. So from Florida, you get animals being imported and animals being exported, and there's a lot of unique species that live throughout South Florida. And as you're mentioning the Keys, that unfortunately people like to get and sell in the black market.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
which is super sad, but like, you know, that's one of my job is I've seen that truck before, and then I'm like, you know, getting suspicious, and then I'm going to call our law enforcement officers, which we're very, very tight with, which, you know, you want to be, and have them, you know, aware of what's going on. So recently we've got iguana contractors, because there's so many iguanas in the Florida Keys.
Invasive species.
And they've really just made the Florida Keys their home. They're thriving there. And we've got contractors that we hire that go onto our properties. Other than that, I think the Florida Keys is the only area where you cannot hunt on wildlife areas in Florida. So if you are for iguanas on these wildlife environmental areas, you have to be contracted. And so there's people now, this is a new thing now in Florida, where just like python hunting, python hunters get to take people out and get paid to take people out to go hunt pythons. That's now happening with iguanas. But there's still not a lot of laws written about it, and people have these like giant air rifles. Giant air rifles going out and taking people on tours and getting paid for these people to go hunt iguanas on the side of the road and possibly into our wildlife environmental areas, because they're not sure, there's no distinguished, you know, no one's looking on a map kind of thing. And so what we've been finding in the last couple months is dumped iguana carcasses on our properties, which it's illegal dumping either way, whether that's, you know, grass cuttings or carcasses. So, and they've been taped up and all that kind of stuff. But we caught them recently, and that was helping work with, you know, our other local county people, and then law enforcement. But it's just weird. It's weird stuff that you wouldn't know about, you know, with wildlife management. Managing an area is just like this huge broad thing. Every day is so very different. Yeah.
So explain a little bit more about what your role, besides apparently helping to catch poachers. It seems like you're you know, when you say you manage these areas, right? That's very broad.
Very broad.
So there's a lot of things that I suspect that you do, right? So go through some of your usual like outings out into these habitats. What type of data are you collecting? What are you trying to learn?
So we have like a 10-year management plan, and in that management plan, it's, you know, trash removal, putting up signs, buying more property to put under environmental protection, wading bird surveys, herp surveys. So it's all these surveying the animals. So every year we kind of switch it up. Okay, this year we're going to do birds. Next year we're going to do bats. So in that year you're studying, you know, the different species of bats in an area, and then the next year you're doing wading bird surveys. And recently we did one where we watched what kind of birds were nesting on one of our islands. And from figuring out, you know, the full year, who's nesting there, who's roosting there. And within that full year, we counted about like 32 different species on this island that were using it either to rest or to breed. And because of that, we were able to put up signs that say the public cannot go here. So we're kind of learning things as we're acquiring islands. So that's an island that we acquired a few years ago. And every time we acquire some new land, we've got to go, you know, we got to get a botanist or someone to go look and see what kind of plants are there, what kind of rare plants do we have there, what kind of exotic plants do we have there. because, like you said, the Florida is huge with invasive, species, and that is huge, including plants. And so plants are one of the biggest thing that we have been tackling on these areas is fighting, these, tiers of very invasive plant species and getting contractors to remove those.
Yeah, I think it's easy for the pythons and the animals to get the attention and the spotlight of invasive species, but often it's the plants that do a lot of damage.
Yeah,
right?
It's really wild how fast they grow and how they take over an area. So that's been a huge, huge thing. And then just staying on top of that, and then reintroducing endangered species as well has been something that we've been doing lately. So yeah, every year is very different, but the majority of it's upkeep. How are our animals and plant species doing on those islands? Are there islands or parcels of land that we can acquire to become environmental areas? So
yeah, it seems like you're always busy, and what I think is probably the biggest perk of your job, I think you would agree, is you're out in the field a lot, right? You're out on a kayak, you're out surveying, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty cool, right?
And then also archaeology. So we've got 20 plus archaeological sites that keep growing. So as I get to go explore these things, that's something that I love to find is whether, that's, early settlers there or the indigenous peoples that first inhabited the Florida Keys. So getting to help archaeologists understand the different tribes that were originally there. So we're still actually putting those pieces together right now. So getting to find after storms happen, they come up onto our shores. All these tribes were on the shoreline. So sometimes after these storms, things get exposed, and that's what's been happening lately with certain surges is that there's old bones getting exposed, and then old shell tools that were whittled to be, fishing lures, fishing weights, old hammers. So everything was made out of shell then, and it's all still lasted this long.
That's
and
pretty
it's
cool.
really, really exciting to get to find those things and call the archaeologists and be like, all right, we've got a new site out here,
So you're kind of also like the Indiana Jones of the Keys.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Don't tell Coyote that. He'll get jealous though.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you say management, you're constantly out there monitoring for the different species, as you mentioned. I'm sure you're having influence on what habitat is protected, right?
Yeah.
What habitat maybe can be used for urbanization, which we'll get into, right, in the Florida Keys. But ultimately, though, what started your love for the natural world? Why was this your dream job? How did that start?
Feels good. Feels good to make a difference.
Okay.
Or think that you're making a difference at least. So, but I bartended and been a server and, worked behind a desk, and I realized that I can't work behind a desk. So I just love being out in the field. There's nothing else like it, but it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Even just picking up trash, part of my job is picking up trash, which I'm proud of, Not proud of the humans dumping the trash, throwing out their beer cans out of their car windows because they're drinking and driving. But, I love my job. It feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it, right?
Somebody has to do it.
It's as simple as picking up that can.
Which we do have contractors that we pay crazy amounts of money to go pick up trash on our shorelines. It's crazy with the currents there in the Florida Keys that the red mangroves really like to hold on to.
Yeah.
Also history, they hold on to a lot of history. Got to find some World War II canteen. I came across a World War II bomb.
Oh. Was it?
That the bomb squad had to come out.
Crazy.
Yeah, so you never know what you're going to find out there either, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So no dead bodies yet, though.
I think that's key, though, is you never know what you're going to find,
Yes.
right? I had the opportunity of working for several years in a management area in South Florida, monitoring crocodiles. And same thing, I would be out in the field every day, and you just never know what you're going to encounter, you know, what cool animal behavior you might see or what species you might see. So,
which I am super jealous of that you got to do that. We do have crocodiles in
we
the
do.
Keys, but
You
I
do.
never get to see them. You know, they're so rare.
I'll take you out one day.
Oh yeah, you
Show
think
you
you're
the
gonna
crocs.
find them before me out there? You got some spots I don't know about?
Yeah.
Have you not been sharing spots with me?
Yeah, it's illegal. I'm not going to,
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you might poach the crocodile.
Oh yeah.
Got to keep it secret,
Okay.
remember?
Okay. What's wrong with you, man? That's not fair.
All right. All this talk about the Florida Keys.
Yes.
Let's learn some cool facts about the Florida Keys, because one of the main reasons why I am doing this podcast is because I like to learn stuff, and I like the audience to take away little like factoids. So
You might know more than me. I don't know.
no, let's just talk about well, I hope not. I mean, you work there. Let's just talk. Give me a little brief description of the Florida Keys. What's special about the Florida Keys? You know, I know they're made up of several thousand islands, so go for it.
Yeah, the Florida Keys are like an archipelago of islands made up of roughly 1,700 islands is
Wow.
what they kind of guesstimate. The numbers kind of vary, and that's over 100 miles long. So it's a very, very long distance. There's one road in, one road out. But it's, you know, old coral reef. And you get oolite, limestone, and it's really cool because the whole entirety of the Keys is you know, that old coral. So you can see old fossils everywhere. So when I first moved to the Florida Keys, I just thought it was so cool. And even along the side of the road, the whole road is made up of that coral. And you can just see all these, you know, very, very old fossils all along the road, which is really, really exciting. But the, you know, Florida Keys, the further south you go, the lower the islands get. So you're going from a not very high point. The highest point, you know, is Key Largo, and then you get down to Key West, and it gets lower and lower and lower. And on every single island, it's so unique and different because of that very little height difference, that elevational zone. And in the upper Keys, you've got these large hardwood hammocks, these bigger trees, open space to walk through. And as you get down to the lower Keys, it's more shrubby, everything's more pygmy size, everything's, you know, shrunken. And it's really, really hard to traverse through it. Very hard to traverse through it. Things are spiky, but you also see different animals on every island. And so you got the Key Largo wood rat, which is, you know, very, very threatened at the moment from pythons and house cats, which are no longer house cats because they're outdoor cats. But, you know, and then you go down the island chain, and depending on that island and plant diversity, you're getting different animals. And then you get to Big Pine, and Big Pine is known for the key deer, the endangered key deer, which is the smallest deer in the northern, you know, U.S. So it's the smallest deer, and almost was at the brink of extinction. And then in the 70s, they started protecting them. And so it's a huge highlight for the Florida Keys is the key deer. But then you've got the marsh rabbits out there. You've got your pygmy rattlesnakes, which is, you know, indigo snakes. But all these things are so hard to see and sadly, you know, are barely there at this point. You know, with sea level rise, the loss of freshwater habitat has been a big topic too.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah. So the Florida Keys is very special, as you're mentioning, because they're just like this outlier, right? They're just
Yeah.
these barely, I guess you could say, like they're just jutting out of the ocean,
Yes.
right? You've got the Atlantic and the Gulf,
Yeah.
right? That borders the Florida Keys. And as well, it's a harsh habitat. Right? The
Super
Florida
harsh.
Keys is not this lush tropical habitat,
no,
right?
everybody thinks it is. It's not.
But it's not. It's
Yeah.
it's actually very harsh for the animals that live on these islands
Yes.
to survive. I mean, they're constantly actually challenged by the environment.
Yeah, from storms and then there's very little, even, hundreds of years ago, there were only certain places and certain islands that really held fresh water for long periods of time. And some of those areas are habited by alligators. And the reasoning that they stay deep and with fresh water is because of alligators. So alligators are very important to the Florida Keys and for the rest of the wildlife there, because they are keeping these freshwater habitats, available for the rest of the animals. But the Florida Keys have the third largest coral barrier reef system, also, and everything is so shallow out there. The depth of the. I mean, you could walk out, for a very long time. What 1 to 5 feet is that shoreline right there, but the third largest coral barrier reef system that is struggling right now, struggling badly, because of tourism.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to say it.
Well, let's say it. Let's talk about it. I mean, what I know about the Keys, right? These very limited islands, right? That could barely, I guess you could say, like, the animals that live there are already struggling to survive naturally.
Yeah.
But now you include humans.
Yeah.
And now you include people that are like, I want to go to Florida Keys because it's like a destination for tourism, right? And what you get, like, how many millions of people go to the Keys every year?
Oh, I don't even. I mean, it's wild.
I do have that figure.
Do you? Thank you. I should know that number, but I don't know that number.
We're getting into it. So every year, around 3 million visitors, right, go down to the Florida Keys. And as you mentioned, number one, it's just one road.
Yeah.
It goes all the way down, 100-mile stretch, right? It goes out all the way down to Key West. You start off in Homestead,
Yes.
Florida, on the mainland, and then you get onto the stretch, go down. So there's just not a lot of land.
No.
Not a lot of space, but yet 3 million people are going there every year.
Insane.
There's going to be a absorption of those limited resources, right? People are going to be taking those limited resources, such as fresh water, right? As you mentioned, like, it's very difficult for fresh water to maintain out there, number one, because it's very porous, right?
Yeah.
The landscape. And so you're surrounded by salt water. So these animals that live there have to, like, basically survive with very little fresh water input.
Yeah. And it's just the fragmentation of the land too. So much has been developed already, and so it's always really tough to try and acquire more property when something does come up available to purchase, because you're fighting people wanting to put a resort there. And those people are backed by way more money than, what we're going to offer for that land. And somehow it's still legal, depending on who you are and who you're connected to rip out an area that's got endangered and threatened species, plants and animals. It's really wild.
So basically, urban development pressures.
Huge.
Right? So that's
Huge.
That's one threat that the Florida Keys is facing. You're seeing that firsthand with going out and managing these different habitats and hopefully protecting them forever. Mm-hmm. But have you ever had a situation where you suggest an area to be protected, but then it gets denied and next thing you know, there's development on it?
It hasn't happened yet with me being there, but we've put in offers for places and they have been denied, and I haven't gotten to see them get ripped up yet. But one of our things too is kind of like looking ahead of things, and even buying places that were scarified, or that were, all the trees were ripped out, and getting ready to put something there, then something falls through with that deal, and then us purchasing that property and then doing restoration. So we've got a lot of areas where we've bought and then done restorative work, which is really exciting.
What are some of those restoration projects look like? Like, are you planting mangroves? Are you just kind of getting that habitat back into a natural state?
Yeah, so some of it's mangroves, depending on what island, again, we're at. it's going to depend on what kind of species of plants we're planting there. So we'll hire a contractor to come in and put in, more limestone rock, or dirt, and then, or digging into the limestone, which is super hard, super hard, break a lot of equipment doing that, and then planting those species, and then having to go back, water those species, keep an eye on these guys. I mean, it's, how many are going to live, how many are going to die, but it takes forever for these things to grow. So, but some things have really taken off, and we've got some really, really awesome restoration areas where it looks like it was, that's how it's always been. And actually a huge chunk of the Florida Keys is kind of like that. The Florida Keys were massive in farming. So it was like one of the top pineapple producers in the U.S. was the Florida Keys.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there used to be a ton of farms down there, which is wild, but a lot of things were cut down, scarified, and then, over time naturally came back up. So it's wild to think that a lot of that was cut down back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting and reassuring that you can kind of like go in and restore habitat.
Yeah.
Nature is delicate, but it's resilient at the same time. And that's kind of a common theme I have seen with talking to other individuals that work in like restoration projects. So that's good to know.
But it's definitely, I think the world's kind of looking at the Florida Keys and that the level of sea rise. And because when we're trying to restore an area, is it worth it to plant certain species because they have to become more salt tolerant in certain areas? But you're hearing the locals that have been there for a long time, first generation, second generation, third generation, folks that are talking about, hey man, this road never used to flood, and now every king tide I'm got a couple feet of water going to my doorstep. So we're seeing all these areas now that, and what that means is, bugs are gone then, and then that means whatever was eaten on those bugs are gone. And then, and then it continues the cycle of that's going to be, kind of like a dead zone other than things that are salt tolerant.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to envision because of all the little islands in the Keys and how basically low they are in elevation. I mean, they're just at sea level. Any rise in sea level will essentially just flood them out and then disappear. So we've got developmental pressures from urbanization. And then we've got, climate change, which is going to lead to a bunch of different aspects, such as sea level rise, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Florida Keys is a perfect example of an area threatened by climate change for many reasons. Because also, let's face it, if it doesn't affect the pockets of people, then people don't care.
Yeah.
And climate change is affecting that, right?
Yeah.
Is affecting the pockets with people that live in the Florida Keys, right? Further development has to stop because of, if there's no island there.
I know.
Or if there's increased hurricanes,
That's why we bought up in Key Largo higher elevation.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's sad to see what's happening to our coral reefs out there.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So climate change, with climate change, you also get a lot of effects on coral reefs.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, coral reefs, they're the third largest coral reef system in the world, which is fantastic. And that's actually one of the draws, right? People go to the Keys specifically to see this wildlife and to go and dive the beautiful coral reefs. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the challenges that the reefs are facing.
Yeah, and for me, I'm more terrestrial. I'm doing things above the
on land.
Land, but who I work with, very much close with people that are working with the corals. I don't know a ton about them, but that coral bleaching has already done some wild damage to the corals out there, like a good chunk of them.
Yeah. So coral bleaching would be an effect of climate change in that as temperatures rise, ocean temperatures are going to increase. And the warmer the oceans are, the more effects it's going to have on the organisms there, including the reefs. So essentially, when it gets too hot, when the water's too hot, the coral reef expel their symbiotic algae, right?
Yeah.
Which makes them turn white, and basically they start to die off.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're seeing that. They didn't see it so much south as the dry tortugas until a couple of years ago. They started seeing that. So then that was really scary that it had already, jumped that far down into that part of the, the Keys. But what's really concerning is that there's so many tour groups that are going out to these places, multiple times a day. And on every tour boat, there's, roughly 50 people. 50 people are going down, 50 people are touching this stuff. I mean, they say that they're telling people not to touch them, but I've gone on a couple of these boats and they don't tell them to not touch them. And then if they do, they're not, telling these people, look, you're off the boat. Sorry, you touched it. But either way, that, our skin, what we put on us, people are peeing in the water. Like all these things are messing with or harassing the wildlife out there. And that boat is doing that like 3 times a day, if not more. And that's like every single portion of the reef almost, until other areas have been protected where they're like, hey man, you can't go do that. But multiple boats throughout the Keys, every single day, hundreds and hundreds of people are going in just one little area, but throughout the island chain.
So basically, the reefs are feeling pressure from like all fronts. They're feeling pressure from tourism, with tourists going out there and potentially touching the reefs, which they're not supposed to do, and damaging the reefs. I'm sure everyone's wearing sunscreen, and these chemicals are leaching into the water. And then, of course, the reefs are feeling it from climate change, from an increase in water temperature, from acidification. So with that said, you have firsthand last year witnessed a really big like coral bleaching event because the water temperatures were so hot, right?
Yeah.
So explain that. Let me just find it here.
So yeah, I can't remember what the temperatures got up to. The water got over 100 degrees?
Yeah, so basically in 2023, there was a huge bleaching event coinciding with an El Nino year. So basically the waters were just unusually hot. They became hot sooner than they were supposed to, right? So we know that like that August time frame is like the hottest time in the Florida Keys. And so there is naturally a point where the oceans do increase. They fluctuate in temperatures all the time, right? But if they begin to like get hot a little sooner than they should, then the organisms like the reefs are not prepared for that. So basically in 2023, the water started to warm up a lot sooner than they should have.
Yeah.
Right? And you witnessed that firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was devastated. And what some other folks realized, there's a gal named Gabby Tejeda, and she went to go look a little further north under the mangroves and saw that, all of these sponges and other things had also died. And, slowly kind of came back, but that there was, an effect that went all the way up into part of the Everglades. And so no one was thinking about this huge, community underneath hanging on the mangroves. And so she was like, it's not just the corals, like it affected all these other creatures that, live on the roots of the mangroves out here too. And our filter guys, working that fresh water through the Everglades and then coming down into the ocean. So there was like all these filter feeders that died off too. And then this year when the water finally cooled down, is when we started seeing these massive die-offs with the sawtooth.
So it makes sense as we learn in biology, like ecosystems are connected, all species, all habitats are connected. in the flow of energy. And when you affect one ecosystem, one species, there's a domino effect.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. To put into perspective, like based on my research, like so the waters like in the Keys like reach temperatures of like 93 degrees Fahrenheit. That's crazy.
It's like a bathtub. It's
Did you go in the water at that point? Did you feel how hot it was?
Yeah, I did feel how hot it was, and there were the folks were coming out being like, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't go into the water because of bacteria." But we had to go in the water anyway. When I'm working, I'm always wearing boots up to my knee because I don't want to get scraped up with all the wild stuff we have out there. But when I have to, walk my kayak through certain areas, I'm wearing my boots because of the jagged limestone. Well, my coworker, she was wearing different water shoes and had some, mosquito bug bites or something like that. And she got MRSA.
Oh, wow.
And so we were like, who else is getting this out here? But so it was the same time when the water started to cool down, but like it was still super hot. And we're out in an island that's far away from the mainland, and she still got that. So it's like, what's going on in our waters? So
yeah, because besides like the temperatures of when the water temperatures increase to like that 90 degree plus Fahrenheit temperatures, that's having another trickle effect where you get less oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the system, which could then start to breed algae, toxic algae blooms.
Yeah.
So there's an effect that happens, and it's not just felt by the corals, but it's felt by a lot of wildlife.
Well, I mean, the Florida Keys is one of the biggest, fishing, places in the world. Everybody wants to travel there to go catch, the silver king, the tarpon, and we were seeing all these, random fish die-offs, and not random at all, but fish die-offs. But
the fish die-offs were attributed to these like
what they believe, because they're still not entirely sure. They haven't come out with this is what happened. But when you think about all of the different fishing charters out there, every day there's like a new fishing charter, and even in just like Marathon, one island, out of Marathon there are, I think, what was it? What do you say? 500 different? Island Mirada, 500 different fishing charters. And you think about in the past in the Florida Keys, and there was only just a few. So there's an insane amount of boats on the water now, way more people fishing, way more people collecting fish. I mean, it's this whole trophy thing, but there's just so many more people that are diving to the corals, so many more boats fishing out there. There's just so much saturation, and ecotourism is not ecotourism. You see who these people are. They've got no education. They're hiring people right off the spot because it's hard for it's an island chain. It's hard for people to get hired out there. It's hard to live out there. It's very expensive, and so there's no real good working community there that's been there, is ingrained in the community, knows the wildlife, know what's wrong, what's right. And we have an issue with jet skiers getting too close to our islands. And it's been a struggle trying to catch this guy who's driving through rafts of birds, taking guiding people, and purposely driving through resting birds. So this is what we're dealing with, is all these different tour groups that have no respect for the environment. And the tourists don't know any better.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it seems like it's hard to regulate those different random tour groups and such. I mean, think about it. You're a tourist. You're like, I want to go to the Keys and I want to, see the reefs. You're going to hire the first maybe tour operator that you find online that might be the cheapest, right?
Yeah.
You assume, they know what they're doing, right? Like, they're going to have the best in mind for the reef and the animals, and you go out and you do your, experience. But you might not understand that maybe that experience is not being regulated properly, and that tour operator is not licensed, or maybe is not like as official as you think. So that's unfortunate in itself.
You would and you would think, we're in the U.S. The Florida Keys is a giant sanctuary. You've got NOAA out there. You think that there's all of these harsh, rules and regulations, and technically there are, but they're not. There's just not enough personnel to regulate them, which is sad. And I'm sure that this is happening all over the world. Like in the Bahamas and all these other places where tourism is so high, what is the price of paradise? It's losing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. What is the price of paradise? And let's face it, we know tourism can be very beneficial for these economies, right? Especially in third world countries and other countries where that's maybe the main source of income. But there has to be regulation in order to do it sustainably. Do you think that the Keys can sustainably, do tourism? Do you want to see maybe like more sustainable tourism occur in the Keys?
I mean, I wish it was a possibility, but how do you go back and be like, all right, well, we've got way too many captains out here. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. And whoever, decided to start a charter back in 2015 and on, you guys are no longer on the water. It's like you can't go back now, and it's what they're trying to do is we're just trying to protect zones. So we're trying to be like, okay, now you guys can't go to this zone anymore. And there's a huge uproar. And there's a huge uproar about, where people can fish and like, well, I've always fished here. I've been fishing here for the last, 30 years. And it's like, okay, but there's nothing there anymore to fish,
So your role and your position, what is your relationship with maybe locals? Like, I'm sure do you try to bridge that gap?
Oh, very much
between
so.
Locals, the captains and such.
Yeah.
And what is that role?
I mean, me, I'm super friendly, so I try to be as close and tied with those people that do live next to our property. So obviously everything is so compact. So a lot of our environmental areas are next to resorts or next to residences. And so it's really communicating with them and talking about how special it is that they have this next to them and not like a huge apartment building, and that they are that's their land for them to watch over. So trying to get them to feel like they're a part of that, and that it is for them, because anybody can go on these properties, but that they're there to help out and make sure that people aren't doing anything. And I always say, if you see anybody dumping anything, or you see anybody, give us a call. But that's something that is kind of a struggle too at the same time with our residents, because maybe if we acquire a property and they've been storing their boat trailer and their boat and their car that's been rotting from the salt out there on our property, and it's like, hey man, I know you've been leaving your stuff over here for the last 30 years, but it's time to find somewhere else for your property. Then you kind of can get on people's nerves, but it's really just working with the residents, because again, it is a small town, just like the Coconut Telegraph, that all of that. So very small, and word gets around. So it's good to stay tight with your residents, 100%, and your captains and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important role that you play, as that you bridge the gap between the science world and then the locals and such. And with your fantastic personality, it's probably easy for you to approach people and to educate them, because ultimately that's part of our job as well, is that education element. Yeah. And I've seen that in many parts of the world and with many of our guests, that they have to bridge that gap. And I think it is our responsibility, right? Regardless of what role you play, it's our responsibility as scientists, biologists, to help the general public understand why it's important to protect something, why this scientific topic is important for them to understand and such. So
Because believe me, I want to fly off the handle sometimes.
I believe you.
I'll be in my work truck and I'm like, all right, Christina, I got to talk myself down, And I'm like, all right, find your center. Find your center. Don't get out and start yelling at this person or throw the trash back at them, So it's like you're in your work car, you're wearing your work uniform,
Musa.
Musa. Find your center, Christina. So that's, almost always the case. Almost always the case. There have been a few times where I've, gone a little.
Sometimes people
extra.
deserve it.
Yeah,
People
but
deserve it.
the public doesn't see, what I see, and I know that because I was them at one point. There's some things that are completely blatantly, they know they wrong, they done something that they're not supposed to, and they know it, and that's when I do have to call law enforcement. Because I've been told to call law enforcement now and not to deal with it myself.
You have that power, which is kind of cool.
Which is great. So again, making friends with the residents and our law enforcement is really, really important so that I don't get in trouble.
Moral of the story is don't cross Christina.
Yes.
Don't get her mad.
Pretty much.
And if you're driving out in the Keys and you see Christina in a car frustrated.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm out there in a ghillie suit watching, so.
It's a tough job. Bottom line, it's a tough job. And
it's a fun job.
I appreciate what you're doing out there in the Florida Keys, and you're learning so much, and you're protecting this very unique habitat.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love my job.
Do you see a lot of other women in your field?
Yeah. Of the 4 of us in habitat and species management for the Florida Keys, 3 of us are women, which is pretty awesome. And then there's a lot of women that are scientists down there. So a lot of women in coral restoration, a lot of women in the parks. There's a huge chunk of women in the Lower Keys. I would say not so much in the majority of Florida with the state, but I mean, still a huge amount. But for some reason, in the Florida Keys, it's women scientists everywhere, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
And women law enforcement officers as well. So I'm a big fan of one gal, her name's Winters, and she rocks.
She's a badass.
She's total badass. I think she jumped on a golf cart to catch somebody. Somebody was like, yeah, hop on. And then she flew off the golf cart. I mean, it's wild, but we've got some really incredible women that work in the Florida Keys, and try to collaborate with them as much as I can. So
heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the science world, biology world, field work, I think often has been dominated a lot by men, right? So, you portray yourself as a very strong woman, right? And
I force it on people. I just have a strong personality, okay?
No, meaning it's great to see women in your position, right? And the fact that you foster that encouragement to other women. I see that a lot, right? The fact that simply us having you on Global Guardians hopefully can inspire another girl, woman, to be like, I want to do what she's doing. Because once again, this field has been dominated a lot by men.
Now, I actually get a lot of women and men that come up to me when I'm working and are just so thankful for what I do and want to get pictures, or want their kids to get pictures, and then want me to talk to their kids. And then a lot of people on social media, because of Brave Wilderness, it's funny because I never would have thought about it, but there's a lot of moms that say, I'm so glad that my son has a woman to watch and to look up to. And I actually get that a lot from a lot of moms about their sons, which is really, really great. Or then dads saying their daughters get to see a woman out doing all these cool things that you and Coyote get to do. So that's always really, really exciting. It makes me feel really good. So
fantastic. Yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. And that's a great segue. Christina, what role do you see social media playing in today's world of conservation?
Well, I think it's a great thing and a scary thing all at the same time. So there's a lot of
The good, the bad.
there's a lot of good and a lot of bad, and I never imagined social media getting me onto television, and that's kind of how I was found by Discover Florida channel. But getting to see all these women in the science field and all these, Instagram is a really great thing in that you can follow who you want to follow. Facebook is, you got to keep it to follow and be in contact with your family. Okay.
Facebook? What's Facebook?
I know, right? So, but Instagram is really great in that you get to follow who you want to follow, even though stuff will come up sponsored and stuff like that all the time. But you really get to see women doing all these awesome jobs and getting to connect with them. And that's what I've been loving about Instagram, is getting to collaborate with women and men in the field, but getting to see what they are doing, but what's happening in Florida for me. There's a lot of things about Florida that I don't know, and I get to find out about it through Instagram. And one of the things that I dislike about Instagram for our parks or for our wildlife is people getting huge followings because of this chinchilla that they have, or this, spider monkey that they have, or like whatever animal it is that they have that they should never have had, but that they're getting this following from that. And then there's this huge demand for people wanting these animals, which I think is horrible. I wish that Instagram did not allow it, but they got to be open for everybody. You know what I mean? So, but there's a lot of things where women on Instagram, should you want to feel like, want to be more womanly, or like, I'm a scientist, but I still want to look good. There's a lot of great things about that. And then there's some hate on that, which is sad, And so people judge women for, in Florida, we see women in bikinis on boats catching fish and stuff like that, and they've got these huge followings, and I go, well, you know what? That woman's working really hard for that body, okay? She ain't sitting around doing nothing, all right? And standing on a boat for several hours is not fun, okay? So, like, if she's out there, fishing that fish, and she looks that good in that bikini, she's working hard for that, okay? So we should not judge.
Christina, you heard it from Christina. Women, wear your bikinis more on Instagram. And likely they're going to somehow pop up on my feed.
You get those Instagrams where it's all butts, but, I try, it's really hard to, as a woman, try and balance that. You're always going to have somebody who's like, I saw the tops of your breasts. It's like, well, they're real, okay?
You heard it from Christina.
Real, all right? Okay? They're a blessing and a curse all at the same time. But it's, it's tough to try and please everybody. And I think that being on Brave Wilderness really opened me up to being like, well, I don't care what you think, And a lot of other people, there were so many great comments, so I just like, trying to do, and people appreciate that, so.
Yeah, well, Christina's revealed a lot, guys. If you were wondering, now you know. But they're real. Yeah. So social media is a tool, right? And it could be used for good, bad, and ugly ways, right? And I think I see that as well. I see a lot of the bad. The one thing I was going to comment on is you do see a lot of creators and pages where they're doing stuff out in nature, but maybe they're not doing it quite right or quite in the legal way, but they gain a huge following. And then what that does is, well, it might influence someone else to be like, oh, cool, I could do the same thing and gain a lot of likes and stuff. And then they go out and unfortunately, it might not be the right ethics of how they're doing so. But in contrast, I do think that social media in general creates a really good platform for biologists to get their work out, to 100%. Show their efforts. I think it's a fantastic way for conservation to reach a general public.
Especially because wildlife biologists don't get paid jack. So, I'm hoping that they're getting a side business out of
a little side hustle.
A side hustle out of Instagram or what, but like, it's really these incredible, awesome, beautiful scientists, just never get credit ever. And this really does make me happy that there's these people that are getting that notoriety. And, because a lot of them don't want the, public eye to be on them and all of that. But
and let's face it, a lot of biologists, naturalists, conservationists, they like nature, they don't like people, right?
Yeah.
So they have a bit of a gap between how they communicate with other people.
Yeah.
I, for one, right, am very introverted and kind of rather just post cool pictures of animals and videos of animals. But I think for those that are seeing the opportunity, you could create such a cool little niche audience in your social media and really educate people. And I see a lot of biologists, including you, that are using social media in very unique ways to reach a general audience.
Yeah, I wish I was a much better editor.
I mean, look,
it's
nowadays,
tough, man. It's
but
hard.
nowadays with social media, like jump cuts and this and that are accepted. Like,
I know.
we're in a world where soon AI is going to be able to edit your video however you like.
I hope so. I hope so.
So beyond your role as a biologist managing this land in the Florida Keys, what else are you doing out there? I know you're doing a lot of side projects.
I know. I think I don't mean to give myself more work. I just do somehow because everything's so interesting. So through social media, I get to meet all these really fun, awesome, wild people. And I'm a huge supporter of anybody doing, trash cleaning. So like in the Florida Keys, we've got multiple entities that pick up trash, Surfrider, Coast Love, and then our wild bird centers. The Florida Keys has an insane amount of migratory birds, shorebirds, just every awesome bird you can think of, our great white herons. And so when it comes to our bird centers, they're so vital and so important. And I've brought so many animals there that have been struck by vehicles and, or fishing line and all that kind of stuff. So I think that when you have a social media platform, which mine is super small, but compared to most people's, but even just having that, being able to share these wonderful people and highlight these people doing incredible things, I think that more people should be doing that who have larger platforms to spread awareness. Like our wildlife centers are almost always never have enough volunteers, never have enough money or grants to do what they're doing constantly. And we need those people so bad, and then yes, cleanups of our shorelines is huge in the Florida Keys, and just gathering those people. So getting the information out there to collaborate and join at these events is really fun. But I love going on wild adventures with people in Florida and getting to learn new things. And I went to the Florida Man Games and got to see the mullet contest. And so Florida is such this broad thing of interesting and weird people and talented people. And last weekend I was with a couple folks from Swamp People, the History Channel, Dusty Crum and his daughter Kaylin Glenn, and I got to join them on a swamp buggy, and they're 10th generation Glades men and women, and so got to look for pythons. So it just, social media gets to bring you to these parts of, for me, Florida, that I never would have gone and gotten to meet people and highlight who they are and what they do. So, and then I did, Wild Woman Wednesdays, which it's really tough to keep up with.
But what is it? What's Wild Woman Wednesdays?
On Wednesdays, I've been trying to do it every Wednesday, but it's just not the case with my workload. Sorry.
Sure, you're a busy woman.
But Wild Woman Wednesdays are about me interviewing folks that I find interesting or that are doing amazing things or things that are out there or wild. And I got to have you on for one evening. And the hour goes by so quickly, but we got to learn about, your work with crocodiles, the power plant that they were at, that they're not nuclear crocs, or maybe they are.
Maybe. Actually, at this point, I could probably say, yeah, they are. I don't know.
So, but getting to know people and showcase what these people get to do and
yeah, heck yeah,
highlight them.
Yeah, you're keeping busy. You're keeping
Yeah.
busy, and I will say probably all those things you're doing, you're not getting paid for. You're just doing it
No,
out of
no.
passion.
No, my husband's probably over here like, no, she's not.
Yeah. But you know what, Christina? I think that shows your dedication and your passion, to wanting to learn, wanting to network. Yeah, Florida is full of just very interesting people.
Yeah. And I'm hoping to get my series going, Florida Wild Woman, where I go all over Florida, because Florida is more than the Florida Man headline. Florida is one of America's last and wildest frontiers. And, we're losing habitat, we're losing cultures out there. And I want to try and get as much of that as I can while we still have the Florida that we have. But to travel around Florida, I mean, it's an experience. It would be a excuse for me to get to go travel all these different parts of Florida. Florida's so massive, but there's so many wonderful things, from the springs to the cowboys. It's huge, and there's so many things to do, and I'm hoping it gets picked up. Working on it right now. So
maybe someone listening to this or watching this podcast might say, hey, we're going to pick it up. But Florida is huge. I was born and raised there. Spent like 30 plus years of my life before I had to move to Ohio for Bray Wilderness. But I also tell people, like, I was in extreme South Florida. Like, I don't really know much north of Lake Okeechobee. Like, Florida's huge, and there's such diverse wildlife and habitats as well. So my expertise is certainly just South Florida, and then the rest is like still a little bit unknown to me.
Super unknown.
Yeah.
When I was driving up to visit our friends Chris and Gabby, I saw this giant black bear run across the road, and I was like, oh my God, I just saw a bear. This is so cool. I never get to see bear where I'm at. So that was like just really, really exciting getting to see that, Luckily, I don't have to worry about bears in the Florida Keys, but it was just so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first time seeing a black bear when I lived in Florida, because it's not common, at least south of Lake Okeechobee, as much. Yeah. Cool. Let's go to some, I've got two final kind of questions for you. You spend a lot of time out in the field.
Yeah.
So here's the first question. In your opinion, what has been the coolest, most meaningful wildlife encounter you have had so far?
Coolest wildlife encounter, definitely hearing baby ibis for the first time. So this wonderful island that has all these birds that nest on it, I have to take a kayak to. It's very shallow water, but the only way I can get to it is by kayak. And as I'm coming around the corner, I start to hear, but it's like full on with 50 babies, but I can't see where they're at. I cannot see where they're at, but I'm hearing it. And my coworker is a huge bird nerd. She's, worked for the Audubon forever, so she knows that sound. And it was really exciting too, because we did not know that they were nesting there. And so she immediately knew what it was, and she's like, oh my gosh, Christina, that's baby ibis. And I was like, no way. And they sound very similar to the spoonbill.
Ah, okay.
But the babies are, and it's like just this huge bush. We could hear that, and we're coming around the corner, and we pull up the kayaks, and we see one white ibis pop out, but they're in nesting color, so it's this bright red beak, bright white and then bright red beak. And then we see another one pop out, and another one pop out, and another one pop out, and all of a sudden this bush is just one giant thing of white. And that's one of those things where I was like, that was so cool. We get to add another species to this island, but ibis are something that you see kind of like pelicans all the time, but you never see where they're nesting. You never think about that. Where are these guys nesting? Because you never see pelican nests, or you never see ibis nests, and they're very picky about where they go. So it was just a really special moment getting to see that. So and hear it, but hearing it was really special. So
that's cool when you get a intimate view into an animal's world and life is really special.
It really, really was a very exciting moment. for sure.
Well, Christina, I think you probably have a lot more wildlife encounters ahead of you. So
Yes.
I'm excited to do this again and maybe hear what your new favorite wildlife encounter might be.
Yes.
And as we end this Global Guardians podcast, I'm going to give you the opportunity, of course, to plug your social medias, plug any organization you want the audience to check out.
Which
and maybe
camera am
help.
I looking at? Which camera?
That one right there.
This one over here?
Sure.
All right, my Instagram, I have 2 of them, Christina Wilson, where you can see me doing everything I do in the field as a wildlife biologist, along with the things I get to do with Brave Wilderness. And then I have a new Instagram called Florida Wild Woman for my, hopefully, Florida Wild Woman series, which I will probably start doing some YouTube with here in the near future. But yeah, you can check that out, floridawildwoman.com. You can reach out to me if you'd like to collaborate or have questions, any of that. But I'm just really excited for Global Guardians and happy that you wanted me on.
Cool. Yeah, you were a natural guest to have, and you know, there's a lot more that a lot more adventures for us, and we'll get you on Global Guardians again because, you know, I'm sure you're going to do a lot more exciting stuff.
I'm sure I'm
in the
definitely going
future.
to have some interesting stories for you
Yeah.
in the near future.
All right, so make sure you go follow Christina Wilson, and we're going to provide all the links to her social medias in the About section of this video and this audio version of this podcast. And hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you. All right, where do you want to go in this world? Pick. Where the heck is that?
Where is that?
Japan.
Japan!
All right. We'll see you on the next Global Guardians in Japan. Cut.